Hello and welcome. In this video, we are going to look at something that runs most people's lives without them paying much attention to how it works, or how their relationship with it really looks. We are talking about thoughts. We have these words and images in our heads. We also have memories of experiences, pieces of music, things we've seen, smells we've encountered, and conversations we've replayed over and over. Alongside these are our beliefs and opinions about ourselves, others, politics, spirituality, the past and the future. Most of us live as if our thoughts are who we are. Not in the sense that we walk around literally declaring, "I am this thought," but in how much we believe and react to the ongoing narrative inside our heads. Why else would we give so much weight to what this inner voice says about the world, ourselves, and other people? So much weight, in fact, that people routinely make life-altering decisions based on it. Some go into debt, end relationships, or even start wars because of what a thought tells them. Despite this, if we try to stop thinking, even for a few seconds, we quickly discover how difficult it is. Thoughts seem to have a life of their own, and yet most people go through life never really investigating how thinking works, or what thoughts even are. Some people have referred to our habitual thoughts as the insane voice inside our heads that is constantly talking to itself. There may be a lot of truth to this description. As we are waking up spiritually, we will inevitably be called to adopt a more conscious relationship with our thoughts. And in this video, you will receive the basics of how to do so. You will learn both how thoughts work and how to build a conscious relationship with them instead of having your life run by them. While a spiritual perspective invites us to observe and de-identify with thought, the materialist view helps illuminate how thought functions on a biological level. From this perspective, thought is a biological process, and it may put things into perspective to know a little about what neuroscience says. The hope is that this will assist in breaking the spell of identification when you understand the mechanics behind the voice in the head that will never shut up. When we know that thoughts are electrochemical processes conditioned by usually unconscious responses to past experiences, rather than true, authentic expressions of who we are, it can put a much-needed distance between us and them, which in turn makes it easier to just observe them instead of getting caught up in them. Many of these thought patterns are absorbed unconsciously from our environment, from parents, teachers, media, peers, and the broader culture we grow up in. Over time, these influences shape the architecture of our inner world, giving rise to habitual ways of thinking that feel like us, but are often borrowed, reactive, or outdated. By recognizing that most thoughts are not personal possessions or reflections of an authentic self, but rather temporary formations shaped by external and internal conditioning, we create space to witness them without being ruled by them. From that space, we gain the freedom to choose which thoughts to follow, which to release, and which to rewire in service of a more conscious, liberated, and present life. The brain processes information through vast networks of neurons, cells that communicate through electrical and chemical signals. Each thought corresponds to a particular pattern of neural activity. But thoughts aren't stored like files in a cabinet. Instead, they are generated dynamically through associations between stored elements. The brain doesn't store entire sentences or ideas in their final form. It stores representations of concepts, sensory impressions, emotional markers, and past patterns of logic. When we think, the brain assembles these fragments into a coherent structure, like a musician improvising with familiar chords. What gives thought its complexity is the way we link elements together in meaningful ways. When you think, "I hope she doesn't forget to bring the keys," your brain isn't retrieving a prepackaged phrase. It's constructing a momentary structure that reflects your current concerns, your model of her behavior, and your sense of what's important. And this construction is influenced by memory, emotional states, language, and learned patterns. Even when we're not consciously thinking about something, The mind continues to run simulations in the background. This is why solutions often come when we stop focusing on a problem. The brain continues to work with whatever material we've fed into it, combining elements, testing outcomes, comparing alternatives. In this way, thought is both intentional and emergent. We do have some control over thought, but the degree of control is often overestimated. We can choose to focus, to direct our thinking to a task or goal. We can ask questions and set intentions. But when strong emotions arise, particularly fear, anger, or grief, our thoughts often spiral into repetitive loops. These loops are hard to break because the emotional charge attached to them feeds their recurrence. It's not just the content of the thought that matters, but the emotional intensity associated with it. A thought becomes sticky when it is soaked in emotion. On top of this, if we begin observing ourselves just a little bit, we can see that unless we have trained ourselves out of this, we sleepwalk through most of our waking life. This means that we are not really present to what is going on in the present moment, either inside or around us. What this means is that even if we are intentional about our thinking in one moment of clarity, as soon as we go unconscious again, the thoughts start to drift, and we again start to react rather than respond to reality. The connection between thought and emotion is crucial. Emotions act as amplifiers for certain thoughts while silencing others. When we're afraid, we selectively attend to threats and interpret ambiguous information as dangerous. When we're in love, our thoughts about the other person are bathed in glowing idealization. In this way, emotions don't just accompany thoughts. They shape the entire terrain of thinking. They prioritize certain memories, color our perceptions, and narrow or widen our mental options. At the same time, thoughts can evoke emotions. Thinking about a past failure can create a current feeling of shame. Imagining a desired future can generate excitement or anxiety. The brain doesn't fully distinguish between what is happening now and what is being vividly imagined. That's why anticipatory thoughts have such power to make us feel, even when nothing is actually happening. The crucial thing to remember here is that emotions create thoughts, and thoughts create emotions, and both can contribute to, give fuel to, and maintain one another. This process can be allowed to go on unconsciously, often with the result of keeping us stuck in negative patterns of thoughts and emotions. Or we can gradually train our brains to adopt a more conscious relationship with our inner lives and use our thoughts and emotions to fuel positive states. As we touched upon earlier, most of the time, our thoughts arise spontaneously. They're not deliberately chosen, but emerge from background processes we don't control. We find ourselves thinking rather than deciding to think. Yet, we can intervene. We can choose to reframe a situation, to examine our assumptions, to direct our attention towards something else. But even then, the new thoughts are constructed from material already present in the mind. We do not invent thought from scratch. We rearrange what's already been experienced, learned, or encoded. And, as we also mentioned earlier, our degree of present moment awareness determines to what degree we slip back into automatic, unconscious thought again. Interestingly, when we try to observe our thoughts directly, something strange happens. The thought stream often stops. For a few seconds, there's a silence, an open space. It's as if the part of us that is watching the thoughts cannot think at the same time. This observation is deeply significant. It is clear evidence that we are not identical to the thinking process. There is a capacity in us that can observe thought without being it. The structure of thought reflects the brain's role as a prediction machine. Based on past experiences, sensory input, and internal states, the brain constantly generates expectations about what will happen next. These expectations show up as thoughts, as anticipations, as simulations. When we enter a familiar room, our mind predicts where the furniture will be. When we read a sentence, we often anticipate the next word. When we engage in social interactions, we predict how others will respond. These predictions shape our behavior and filter our perception. Having this knowledge in the back of your mind will help you adopt a more conscious relationship with your experiences. Every time you go, aha, this is what is happening here, instead of having your experiences just pass you by while you think of something else, you've shifted your focus away from living in the head and into conscious reflection on your present moment experience. This is significant because it helps reshape your neurology and therefore your relationship with both yourself and reality. Think about what this means. By consciously shifting your focus, you don't just reshape your experience here and now. You also reshape all your future experience and even how you view your past experience. If what this means clicks for you, you should probably pause the video, take a deep breath, and let it sink in. This is a major key to conscious creation, as opposed to letting life just happen to you. Next, language plays a central role in thought. While not all thought is verbal, much of it is structured through internal language. Language gives thought a sequential form. It unfolds in time, one word after another. But beneath that linear stream, there is a vast network of associations and non-verbal representations. We also think in images, sounds, movements, and emotional tones. The language of thought is multi-layered. Words help us explain and communicate, but deeper layers of thought operate without words, often in flashes of intuition, symbols, or patterns. Thought also interfaces with memory in a dynamic way. We don't simply recall events as they were. We reconstruct memories based on what we now believe, how we feel in the present, and the questions we are asking. Each time we revisit a memory, it is subtly altered, reinterpreted, and stored again. This means that thought not only reflects our past, but continually reshapes it. Our story is always being revised, whether we take conscious part in it or not. This deserves some reflection, because what this means is that the past, in a very literal sense, is open to change. And remember, this goes for everyone else as well. If you are the one carrying the strongest memory of something, you are also the one with the strongest power to change the event. When we change a memory, and the meaning we give the memory, we also rewrite the present moment and the future. And think about this. A past experience is really no more real than the memory we have of it. This is not about denying the past, but about recognizing the fluidity of memory and using it to our advantage. Another fascinating aspect of thought is how much of it is subconscious. We tend to focus only on the thoughts that appear in our awareness, but studies in cognitive science have shown that the vast majority of mental processing happens below the surface. Choices, preferences, and judgments are often made before we're even aware of having thought about them. The conscious mind is more like a spokesperson for decisions already made. Despite all this complexity, thought also reveals clear patterns. As touched upon earlier, many of our thoughts are habitual. They follow the same grooves, revisit the same concerns, draw the same conclusions. These thought habits form the mental equivalent of muscle memory. They become our personality, our worldview, our typical reactions. But just like muscle habits, they can be changed with effort, repetition, and awareness. In this, it's important to remember that these thoughts do not equal reality, whether in regard to ourselves, others, or the world in general. They are simply habits that can be broken. It's also important to realize that thought is not inherently rational. Much of our thinking is biased, reactive, and emotionally charged. We remember negative experiences more vividly than positive ones. We overestimate threats. We assume we're right more often than we are. These tendencies served an evolutionary purpose, helping us survive in unpredictable environments, but they don't always serve us in the modern world. where we play by very different rules than our ancestors, and where we are faced with far greater complexity. This is why mindfulness and metacognition, thinking about thinking, have become important tools. When we begin to observe how our thoughts arise, how they affect our emotions, how they color our perception, we can begin to step back from them. We no longer have to believe every thought. We can ask, is this useful? Is this true? Is this the only way to see this situation? In summary, what we call thoughts are not just passive reflections of reality, but active, dynamic constructions that shape and reshape how we experience life. They are not inherently true, nor are they necessarily ours in any deep or fixed sense. They emerge from conditioned responses, past experiences, emotional states, and patterns deeply embedded in our neurology. Most of them arise without our conscious choice, and yet they go on to define how we feel, what we remember, how we behave, and even who we believe we are. But by bringing awareness to the thought process itself, we begin to step out of automatic identification. We start to see thoughts as something we can observe, question, and redirect. And from that space, we gain the power to reshape our inner world, moment by moment, memory by memory, into something more conscious, more free, and more in alignment with who we truly are, beyond the voice in the head. As we've now seen, some thoughts empower us, others imprison us. Learning to distinguish between them is one of the most important skills we can develop. We can cultivate thoughts that expand our understanding, deepen our compassion, and increase our clarity. At the same time, we can let go of thoughts that keep us stuck, fearful, or bitter, as long as we don't confuse these thoughts with objective reality. The mind is not a blank slate, nor is it a single voice. It's more like a symphony of overlapping systems: memory, emotion, perception, language, instinct, imagination. Thought is what happens when these systems communicate. And just as in a symphony, sometimes the result is harmonious, sometimes dissonant. But the more we listen, the more we understand the patterns, the more we begin to take part in the music. Thought is not the enemy, but it is not the master either. It is a tool, powerful, creative, and flawed. When we see thought for what it is, a process, not a truth, we begin to reclaim our attention, our energy, and our peace. We begin to live not as prisoners of our thinking, but as witnesses to it. And in that witnessing, a new space opens, one in which we can truly choose how we respond to life. It may at first feel a bit disempowering to know that we are not in as much control of our inner lives as we thought. However, this has always been our reality, but once we know it, we can start to adopt a more conscious relationship toward it. One of the first things we must realize is that force will not work here. As mentioned, the first step is instead conscious awareness. Become acquainted with your thoughts, how they interact with your emotions, and how they shape your behavior, and the way you speak to others. This will start to break the identification. With time, the gap between your observer self and the thoughts will widen, which will allow you to make more conscious choices, instead of the knee-jerk reaction of immediately believing what the thoughts are saying and then acting upon them. This means that the biggest change does not come from doing anything. The biggest change comes from simply observing and bringing more awareness into the present moment. Remember this: just by shedding light on what was previously hidden, you change your neurology, which means that you change your relationship with reality. And in the long run, you therefore alter the course of your life. If you want to learn more about self-observation as taught in the Fourth Way system, a school of conscious self-development that emphasizes presence and self-observation, there is a link to a video about it available on the end screen right now, together with videos about David R. Hawkins's insights on meditation and the shift that we are going through on the inside right now. You've now reached the end of the video. Remember to like and subscribe. Thank you for your time.